don't think twice about getting that boat out of storage early. Don't think twice about going out there. I mean, the outboards, especially if you have a 4-stroke now and you know and you winterized it beforehand, it doesn't matter if it's going to freeze back up again. The only thing you got to do is make sure you drain your boat plug at the end of the day if it's going to still get cold, even if you're storing it in your yard. Trim that engine down. They're all, you know, like the Mercury's, even if you lift it trimmed up, they're self-draining. You're not going to hurt a thing. I haven't winterized a boat in 15 years because there's just, they're so good now, you really don't have to. And this fishing right now, and again, in the fall, before the ice comes on, is some of the best that there is, you know, especially then people are, you know, it's hunting season and Christmas is coming and there's just not near as much pressure out there on the water. But these fish get extremely shallow really quick. I mean, again, my always thought process growing up is that cold water, their metabolism's low and that they just can't really move and they're not gonna chase a bait and they're not very aggressive. But the bottom line is they have to eat 365 days a year. They have to eat all year long. And even though their metabolism is slower, and when we were out there, the water temperature was basically 40 point, it got up to 41 at the end of the day with the ice on it, and that's the surface temperature. And I'm sure that was because of the wind. I'm sure most of that water down in there is still in the 30s. You know, when there's that much ice on the lakes, it's really cold. And the very first cast that I made, we shut down and I launched in this hole. The very first cast that I made with my Mega Live, I seen a little weed clump out there. I threw my jerkbait out there by it. It's almost too cold for a jerkbait in most people's thoughts. And I watched as a fish left that weed clump, came up and ate my jerkbait, the very first cast. Now, it was only about 11 or 12 incher, but I'm gonna tell you, after the winter that I've had, that was the best bite I've had, you know, and it's like catching a 7-pounder, you know. So it was a lot of fun, and I learned pretty quick after that, you know, hey, day in, day out, you've got to, you know, use the right baits. But early season, my 2 #1 baits, and again, as soon as that ice comes off, you'll see a 5 to 7 degree jump in water temperature, especially with this. I mean, we're going to have 75-degree weather the next couple of days, right? You're going to see, and wind. And that's the best thing to warm up a lake. And right now we got a full moon. That moon is way more powerful than water temperature at moving fish shallow. I mean, they're 2 months from spawning here, but they're still, on that full moon, they still think about it every time that comes full. So full moon is actually 2-day here in Michigan. So I track that real close. I'm a weather junkie. I have, you know, and it's easy to do now with a smartphone, right? I've got, you know, 5 different weather apps on there. You know, I love my radar because, you know, I don't want to be stuck out there and be caught in a thunderstorm or anything like that. So that's a great way to see as fronts are coming in and things like that, to track the rain if you want to. And then Wind Finder's another one that I really, really like here in Michigan, because there's lots of different buoys around, especially on the Great Lakes and things like that. There's some special apps just for Lake Michigan where you can see exactly what the water temperature is and the wind out there. And a lot of it, like Brandon's my, you know, cameraman producer, he loves to salmon and walleye fish, so he's looking at all these on the big water because that's where he likes to fish. But I'm more looking at the different stations inland and that, where I can see what the wind is, the direction, the velocity, because it really makes a big difference. You know, these next couple days we're going to get some really good south winds that are blowing, you know, 75-degree air to the water, and the north end of these lakes, the sun's in the southern sky right now. So everything you look at, I mean, the first thing I do when I go to a lake is I want to see where the most flats are at. And in the springtime right now, it's all the ones, anything that's on a northerly bank. That's the first place where they're going to be. I seen it a few years back, a little lake by me I went to in early April. Again, we had a late ice. We had ice up until the end of March. Actually, it's probably been 10 years ago. Time flies, right? It's been that long since we've had this type of winter again. And it was really cold. The ice had just gone out a couple days before, and we had one of those crazy spells like this where it's getting really warm. And it had been that way for a day, and it was blowing about 25 out of the south. And there was about a 8 or 9 degree temperature difference between the water, which was in like 43 on the south end of the lake, and the north end of the lake, it was basically almost 50. And every bass in the lake was on that shore. Like, it was unbelievable. Caught 100 of them on a red-eye shad then. So that's what I really look for, is those areas that have shallow flats on the north end of the lake. And then you just got to pick the right technique for that particular situation, the depth, the habitat, the type of cover that there is. Yeah, you're not late, just in time.
I just called your brother.
Oh, what'd you call him? But no, so seriously, we have a lot of diversity in our lakes. So some of the lakes, and the ones that I like the best that start earliest, are the shallower ones that have a lot of vegetation. If there's a marsh on the north end, lily pads, cattails, dark bottom, you get that radiant heat from the sun, and those fish just go to it. You know, just like your cat in the window, or your dog wants to get, you know, in a sunbeam and just sit there and soak it up. The bass are the same way. And it's crazy, like, how shallow they'll get. I mean, we fished the other day at Gun Lake, and again, I'm 100 yards from the ice shelf. There's a 10, 15-foot hole there, and on the edge of it where it leads out into the flat and the lake, I'm like, man, a lot of times they'll sneak up on these flats. We've been there about an hour, and there's a couple little sand dark spots there. I pitched a baby Z2 on the Ned head out there to one of those sand spots like that, and caught that really good smallmouth. And you know, one of the other kids in my boat, he caught one there too on that. And again, that's 3 foot of water, and it's 41 degrees, 40 degrees. And the depth doesn't really mean anything to them. They like that, you know, it was sunny. They like that radiant heat. So I'm gonna look for those things. Again, if I got a lot of vegetation and cover, man, my #1 early spring bait is a thunder cricket, bladed jig. Around here, what do bass eat in our inland lakes? Anything that gets in front of them, right? But primarily, they love bluegills. They're going to eat perch. They'll eat I mean, whatever bait fish are in there, they're obviously going to get those. But early spring, crawfish are another big factor. It's easy for them to catch them. They're moving slow too. They pile up on crawfish, and they definitely are where the bluegills winter. So if you do ice fish, like I do, you remember where you caught them through the ice? Last month or a week ago when you were there, immediately that's the best place to start your spring, is where those bluegills are at, because that's where the bass are going to be. So I'm going to go to the closest edge, the inside turn, weed line, anything like that, where I can fish in those areas. So even if you don't bluegill fish and you drive by the lake and you see where the bluegill fishermen are all standing, that's where you want to go, right there to start with. But as they move shallow like that, it really works, you know, well. The next bait that you have to have is a lipless crankbait. So this is a Strike King red-eye shad. It is exponentially, since it came out, since it was introduced, and this was, man, 2008, something like that, when we developed this bait. It's just been unbelievable springtime bait. Now, I catch fish with it all seasons of the year. So if you watch our show, anybody watch the VanDam Experience, my television show? So it's only my first year, but we started the season off down in Texas at Lake of the Pines, and it's a great, you know, it was great. That was last year in February, and you know, early season pre-spawn, hydrilla, lots of big bass and stuff. And we finished the season last fall with a Strike King red-eye shad catching smallmouth in the Great Lakes. So I mean, it's an all-season bait for me. We were fishing in October and catching them off the flats. What's awesome about a red-eye shad over other lipless crankbaits is the way that it falls. So if you don't have one in your tackle box, I've got lots of videos out and things like that. You can check them out on my YouTube channel and stuff. But the way a red-eye shad falls, it just has that wiggle and shimmy to it. And that's what I like to do, is make sure that it's hitting the bottom. This time of the year, it's absolutely critical. So these fish are up on those shallow flats. You know, I'm going to use whatever size line that I need to be able to get that bait to the bottom. So if it's a shallower lake like Gun Lake, that's not a problem, because it's only, you know, most of those flats, 3/4 of the lake is 3 to 5 foot deep. And, you know, you can put 14 or 17 pound line on your bait caster, and I like to use a little heavier when it's shallow like that. It helps me slow it down in this colder water so I can reel it a little slower and just keep it ticking and skipping across the bottom. If I hit something with it, I like to kind of rip it up and then let that bait flutter down. So all you got to do is drop one over the side, tied on, and let it sink to the bottom and take a look at it, and you'll see exactly what I'm saying. So it's that shimmy when it falls that they can't handle. So if you're reeling it along, you're going to catch plenty of them that way. But as soon as you hit a piece of grass or a rock or gravel or dead leaves on the bottom, just snap it up a little bit, let that thing sink down, and 9 times out of 10, that's when they really, really like to bite it. And when you get a bite this time of year, there's not going to be just one. So a lot of times, you know, you can cover a lot of water and you're fishing a lot of weed edges or flats or inside corners or turns or bays or things like that, and you may not run into them. But when you finally do get one, they're not usually just one. Sometimes there's hundreds. Sometimes there's thousands. So it can be really, really special, and that's why I love the early season. So again, if I got a lot of these lakes that have, you know, some scattered grass and things like that in it, or even a lot of grass, that bladed jig and the thunder cricket are just absolute the devil to them. My all-time favorite #1 bait for pre-spawn spring fishing, though, is a jerkbait. So everybody like a jerkbait? Yeah, I got to keep that a secret that it's such an all-season bait for a lot of years until live streaming bass fishing started happening. So I remember at the Bassmaster Classic, the only one I never qualified in my whole career, in 2016 at Lake Hartwell. They had me in the studio that morning, and that was the first time they ever live streamed a bass tournament. And I watched that, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to change the world. Now they live stream every college, high school, open, tackle warehouse pro circuit, Bass Pro Tour, Elite Series. You can watch live bass fishing to a fault where it could be almost like gambling, right? There's too much of it. And you know, you can get a lot out of it because you just watch how guys are doing it. And some guys talk more than others and things like that. But I can promise you, if you watch one of my videos, I'm always telling you what I'm trying to do. I don't have anything to hide anymore, right? I'm not competing. So, you know, watching a good angler fish a jerkbait, and now you see a lot of people doing that with forward-facing sonar. It's arguably one of the best tools for that, as long as fish are in that particular depth zone. And we've got jerkbaits now that'll run down to about 10 or 12 feet. So, I mean, that gives you a pretty big window that it's very efficient. So I've always got one tied on. You know, I think the setup and everything that you use for fishing one is really critical. I mean, I've got my own signature rod just for it. You know, you don't want a rod that's too long. You don't want a rod that's too soft. You want to have, you know, fluorocarbon line that is low and stretched to make that bait really jump. And then you got to have the right lure tied onto it too. So, you know, the handle's got to be a little shorter, because it's not, how easy is it to go out there and do that for 8 hours or 9 hours straight? Well, if you do it correctly, it's actually not very hard if you have the right equipment. So the biggest thing is you don't want to have a rod that's forcing you to have your arms farther away from your body and to use a motion that's going to put a lot more extra stress on it, on your arms and elbows and things like that. I've had a lot of tournaments over the years where I do this for 7 days straight, start to finish. And if you're doing that, especially, those are typically smallmouth tournaments. If I do that, you're really working the bait for a smallmouth. They like an aggressive retrieve, and it's physically demanding. So having the right equipment and using the right exact style in your retrieve and how you move your arms is a big part of that. So the #1 thing in fishing a jerkbait is you got to never move the bait with your reels. You should always, every twitch or every series that you do when you're jerking a jerkbait, start and finish with slack in your line. That's what makes the bait erratic. Why they bite a jerkbait so good is because it mimics an injured bait fish, right? That's what we're trying to do. It's darting back and forth, it's starting and stopping. I watch lots and lots of people, and I did for years in tournaments where I'm throwing a jerkbait and I watch my co-angler in the back, and they reel the whole time. They never stop reeling. They're always and your line never has slack in it, it never goes loose, and that bait never does anything but go in a straight line that way. Most important thing you can do with a jerkbait is start with slack, do your retrieve, and point the rod back at it so you finish with slack. You'll see the line slap on the water if you're doing it correctly. And if you watch any of my videos or shows when I'm doing it, I mean, it looks like I'm really working it hard. I like to use a bait cast outfit. You can use a spinning rod just as easily. I like a bait caster because we've designed these baits to make them very castable. You know, they got weight transfer systems in it. They basically suspend. So even in the wind, you can cast them real well. But what I want to do is make it physically easier on my body or on my arms to do it. So the right bait casting outfit really helps you do that. And again, I'm going to, instead of working to the side where you're moving your arm like this and your elbows and your wrist, that's how you end up with carpal tunnel and tennis elbow real quick. The other thing, and I learned this after, because I'm getting up there a little long in the tooth these days myself, is that before you go fishing, and I don't care if you're his age, take a minute and loosen up and stretch out before you go out there. I mean, I learned that the hard way a long time ago at a Kentucky Lake tournament where I was catching them cranking a 6XD, where if you start your first cast where you're trying to bomb it 60 yards and wind that plug and do that all day long for a day, you're gonna end up having a problem. So take a few minutes, just like, you know, one of the Detroit Lions players would do, or a basketball player or anything like that. Do some hand stretches, do some wrist stretches, do some elbow stretches, and get yourself loosened up for it. And the same thing again, you know, if I can just jerk that jerkbait down like this, it's just so much easier where I'm not even really bending a lot of my wrist. Just a little bit of bend there and straight down. And again, I've got slack in my line the whole way. Never move the bait with your reel. If your line is tight and when you're reeling, you're pulling the bait towards you, it's not going to have that action. What I want to do with a jerkbait is make sure that it has the maximum side-to-side erratic action. That's how I design these KVD jerkbaits, so that when you pop them like that, it's going to jump forward, and when you pop the rod tip back towards it and throw it that slack line, right, that's what makes it sometimes go to the right, sometimes go to the left. I mean, it never goes to the same place twice, and that's what the bass can't take. So this lure right here, I have more confidence in this for pulling a bass a long distance, especially a fish that is not in an aggressive feeding mood. I can get them to travel farther for that than anything I've got in my tackle box. I've learned that. I've been doing this for 40 years with these baits. I was jerking jerkbaits before they were jerkbaits. When we were weighting Rapalas and Rogues and things back in the day, when we were just trying to get them to make them run deeper, and bomber long A's, and I've been through all of them. Now, there's a ton of great baits on the market. You know, I've got a whole line of them, of KVD jerkbaits that I've developed for Strike King, from, you know, the little 100 series finesse jerkbait to the 200, which is a great slash bait. It's perfect for that, you know, like 3 to 5 foot zone. I have the 300 series, which is my staple 3-hook bait, 4.5 inches long, basically runs 5 or 6 foot deep, which is deeper than most in that same category. And then we have a deep diver, the 300 series deep, that's got a long bill on it. It's one of my favorites. We've got them now in these new premium color, the Elite series, that come with a must-add triple grips right out of the box. Siren color is one of my favorites for smallmouth. And you know, that bait will run an easy 10 foot. And we also have a new sinking model, which we built just for, well, we built it for forward-facing sonar. But what I've learned is that when we built this sinking version, and it basically sinks about a foot every 3 seconds. So it's not like it's sinking like a brick, but you can get it down there. And what I've learned with forward-facing sonar is that the deeper it gets, the slower it sinks. You got a little drag and tension on your line, so it's a bait that's very easy to fish in that 10 to 15 foot zone. And if we got clear water like we have here, I mean, I catch them out of 30, 40 foot of water, pulling them off the bottom up to get that bait, because as far as they can see this is the strike zone. They will come as far as they can see that bait. So if the water's dirty, this isn't the bait. This is not what you want to use. Now, I've had great success in certain situations just because of the action of that, you know, that injured bait fish action in dirty water when bass are, when I know right where they're sitting on a spot, man, I know that I can throw a jig, a finesse bait, a worm, different things in there and catch some. But if I throw that jerkbait by them, they're probably going to react to it even if they can't see it more than a few feet away. So it's something that I've got tied on 365 days a year, whether I'm in Florida, Texas, California, Michigan, the Potomac River, anywhere in between Kentucky Lake, it don't matter. But I just know the power of this bait and how effective it is at triggering fish to bite. But just knowing, the correct way to work it, and then again, basically transitioning that for the seasons. Like right now, you're not going to catch them like I do in the summer where you're really working it hard and really fast and it's super erratic. Nothing in nature is moving like that right now. Water's 40 degrees, right? So early season, you slow it down. I'm going to jerk it a couple times, let it pause, let it sit there for 2 or 3 seconds. And truly, again, one of the things that I've learned, and I think I've always thought I'm like a really, really good angler. And if there's bass in the area where I'm fishing, that I'm going to be able to catch them, right? Like I'm so confident. I've been so confident. What I've learned with my Mega Live 2 and forward-facing sonar is there's a whole lot more of them that I don't catch. But that you get some interest out of them. You see that, hey, they start to follow it. And that's where it really comes into play. And you can watch this in the tournaments and stuff when you see a guy working a jerkbait and he sees one coming, you know when to stop it, you know when to twitch it. You basically almost can talk them into biting by just watching their reaction. So I've been able to do that visually over my career when I got my polarized glasses and I can see one following it. I'm like, oh yeah, if I can see one as far out as possible, a lot of times I can figure out a way to get that fish to react just by, popping it or speeding it up and then, stopping it, just doing something different. A lot of cases, when they're just following it, tells me that I got the wrong color. So that's the next big thing. And when you're using jerkbaits, especially here in Michigan, you want to pick the most natural color that's visible based on the conditions and water clarity that you have. So again, like this natural bluegill color is one of my favorites. It's a great clear water color. But if you got stained conditions, dirty water, I want to pick something a lot brighter. I mean, that's why we built this, well, 2 reasons why we built that siren color, which is solid pearl and chartreuse, is for it to be a beacon out there so they can see it from forever away. So smallmouth love this in crystal clear water, and the reason it's that is it's like a nuclear bomb out there. They are so aggressive that they'll chase it a long ways. But that's also my number one. That's what I go to if the water's dirty and I'm going to throw a jerkbait where you can't see but a foot or maybe 2 foot down. That's the color I want. I want it to be as visible as possible. It's a lot easier to trick a bass into biting anything in dirty water, I've learned in my career, than it is in clear water. Clear water, you can't hardly go wrong with matching the hatch. So, picking a color that's, again, natural, but also visible for the conditions. And think about it, like a day like today when it's bright and sunny out, man, they can see from a long ways away. And a flashy color like a chrome or gold, it gives off it's a lot. Where you get a cloudy day and it's totally different. That bait, it has a lot less flash to it. This color, a natural color like this, is not near as visible. So typically on those cloudy days, I want to pick a color that's a little louder. It's a little more unnatural, a little bit more visible, because they see a lot better in bright sun, and they do see color really well. They see color exceptionally well under good light conditions. They also see very well in low light, but they see in black and white. So, same thing again, in dirty water, low light condition, or a real cloudy day, you take a black and white photo of that chartreuse pearl bait, it's basically solid white, right? And it's very natural to them in that situation, I mean, especially with a bait that's above their line of sight. That's something I always try to do with my jerkbait, is make sure that I'm fishing it above them. Don't throw a bait that runs 6 or 7 foot on a 7 foot flat. You want to pick a bait that only is running 3 foot, or choose a setup or line size that makes it run higher. So that means heavier line to keep the bait higher in the water column, so they're looking up at it against that bright surface. And everything that swims has a light colored bottom, right? Any fish you ever catch, it's got a white bottom or a light colored belly. I don't care if it's an emerald shiner or something that's smelt that's almost translucent. They're all light. Mother Nature builds them that way on purpose. So day in, day out, man, if you're throwing something that's light colored on the bottom, it's pretty much the deal. I mean, most of the baits that I throw in a jerkbait have a light colored bottom, either a light pearl or a white belly for that reason. And it just helps them see it from a long ways away. And it's going to be very natural and good in that type of situation. So it's a deadly, deadly bait for springtime. In Michigan especially, it's my go-to. I mean, for those days when you want to go out there and try to cover water to find fish, there's really not a better tool for it. That being said, you know, and I love to power fish, but once you find that little area, and I told you there's going to be a lot of them, man, you got to have your finesse baits. So I learned this a long time ago, and I have a lot of confidence in power fishing, but you also have to have those natural baits. And, you know, number one bait for me still all time is a tube. You know, and they make different sizes. This little one right here, the little Strike King Bitsy tube, this one is the devil to me. I mean, I learned that, and my good buddy Mark Zona taught me the power of a Bitsy tube. If they're fussy or there's a lot of pressure and they're not committing to a full-size one, that one is really good. The other bait that I just love when I'm fishing down on the bottom is, and a lot of people like Ned heads, but I like that baby Z2, that little, you know, it's made of that Elastec stretchy material. It's got some buoyancy to it. It's loaded with salt, and it's on this flat jig head. I use the Strike King Ned head, and it makes it stands. Every time you hop it, this is what it does on the bottom. And again, I've got lots of great videos and tips and things like that we've posted on our YouTube channel that show the underwater of action of these baits. And when you see that, you go, oh, now I get it, why this is so deadly effective, because it's, even when it's sitting still, it's alive. It's still quivering, it's wiggling. This is my number one preseason finesse bait for this time of year right now. I know that I'm gonna get them to bite that. I like little swim baits and stuff like that on the bottom, but that Strike King Baby Z2 on a Ned is just super incredible. You know, for this early season fishing. So once you, again, if you catch them on a red eye shad or a thunder cricket or a jerkbait out of an area, you definitely want to spend some time. And I almost always go to a tube first. I love a tube because it imitates a crawfish, a goby. It could be a perch, it could be a bluegill. You know, everything's on these Clearwater lakes stays pretty well locked down on the bottom in this early season. So it's definitely a go-to. For that. If I got a spot I know they're sitting on, man, it's hard for me to not throw that in there. And then obviously, you know, the third thing is a drop shot rig. Basically the same exact scenario, and my number one favorite thing is a Baby Z2 on that. So I'm gonna, you know, I've got my little weight, I've got it tied on. I use a little Mustad grip pin hook, which basically allows me to thread it on there like a swim bait. And it makes it stand straight out on the line. And when you're fishing this drop shot rig with this Baby Z2, it swims just like a real minnow all the time. There's lots of different baits. You can put little worms. There's little, I mean, I love a half shell and, you know, a dream shot. There's lots of great drop shot baits, but man, this thing's up off the bottom. It's very visible. It looks just like a little bait fish. This is a morning dawn color. I mean, we make every color under the sun to match any type of forage, from gobies to bluegills to perch to shiners to stuff like that that's not even real. I mean, and they really work really well because of the buoyancy that they have and what they do. And I just use just enough weight to make sure that bait I can keep the line tight as it's coming across the bottom. If you got too much, you lose a lot of your feel. So it really is the depth of the water. Around here, man, a 1/4 ounce drop shot weight in the spring of the year, that's all you need. You're not fishing, these fish are not gonna be 30 foot deep right now. They're gonna get as shallow as possible as they can, just because it warms up quicker there. So nice lightweight. And again, when you can see my leader's pretty long here, but when you're casting it out there, and you're working along the bottom, it's only a few inches off the bottom this way, right? And it has just a tremendous amount of action. So if you get it around, you know, and I use my polarized glasses more than, it's probably more important right now than any other time, because you can see those edges. You can see the weed clumps. You can see the sand spots. You can see the drop off. You can see the break off. The water's the cleanest it's going to be right now out there. I mean, it is the clearest the drone video from us out in the lake the other day, it looks like we're running in a foot of water because you can just see the bottom so perfectly. There's no algae, there's no plankton in the water right now. I mean, it's the clearest that it's going to be. So the fish see that way too. So that's why it's important to use those really natural colors. Another bait that I really like, and especially for catching big fish, and we got a couple of sizes. A lot of people they just get scared by throwing big baits, but is a natural swim bait. And this is a new bait from Strike King called the Final Copy. This is the little 4.5 inch version right here. I typically, even here in Michigan, I throw the big one, the 6 inch one. This size right here, people think, man, it's big, but first and foremost, I'm looking for big ones. But I catch so many 10 inch, 11 inch, 12 inch bass with this one right here. It's crazy. So it's got a really strong magnet that holds that treble hook in place. It's also got a spot on the top where you can, if you're fishing it around a lot of weeds, you just undo that little harness with the split ring there and put it on the top, and it keeps it so then you can reel it and the hook isn't catching the weeds on it, so the hook rides on the top that way. Comes pre-rigged just like that with the treble on the bottom, but this 6 inch size right here, it's just a magnet, and it is no question the best during the pre-spawn period from, I typically like it to warm up just a little bit, but as soon as we get a few degrees up, that water temperature's getting into the upper 40s and that, throw in one of these, and I throw it on heavy line. And the reason I like the heavy line is to help slow it down a little bit. I'll put it on 20-pound fluorocarbon and just try to reel that down any weed edge or any edge that I possibly can, fish it where that bait is staying in the strike zone for the whole cast. And that Final Copy is deadly. So again, there's both sizes, and if they're eating a lot of smaller bait fish, there's no doubt that I've seen times, and I saw this last year during the summer, that they really wanted the small size because we were matching the alewives that they were feeding on, and they were exactly the same size as this. Where the bigger one, I'd get some hits on it, and they just weren't committing to it fully, where they would actually they were swallowing the little smaller one. But it's super natural. Comes in like this is a perch color right there, and it's just like it looks like the real thing. But there's all different shades and colors for whatever water clarity that you want, but there's a lot of really natural colors. These are really good in clear water just because they have so much powerful swimming action. They rock back and forth and that tail kicks, and it's a lot of fun to fish. So I've got some other baits up here too. The new Strike King gravel dog. I love to crank in the spring. The red-eye shad is my first bait to start off with, but I take a trip every year, a couple trips usually, over to Lake St. Clair, and when they get up on those flats there in that 6 to 10 foot of water, there's nothing better than a gravel dog for cranking, especially to catch big ones. First show of the VanDam experience was me and Zona over there last spring of actually catching them, and we caught them with we caught 200 that day. It was incredible. But the big ones we caught all came cranking. It just seems like it catches a better grade of fish. The biggest thing is, and we all look for that magic lure, right? That silver bullet, the Lone Ranger silver bullet, right? The thing that just always works. Well, we have so many tools in our tackle box now that in a lot of cases there's a whole lot of them. And confidence is the most important thing. The worst thing you can do is go out there and just say, man, this is my favorite bait and this is what I want to use. You have to use the right tool for the job. Just like a golfer, you don't try to hit it on the putting green with a 3-iron. You don't hit your driver for a 100-yard shot. You got to use the right bait for the situation. So I think about the depth, the type of cover there, the water clarity, the temperature, and all that, and choosing the technique. But in a lot of cases, you can use multiple baits to do the same job. You can throw a thunder cricket in the same place you can throw a spinnerbait. You can throw a swim jig in the same place as you can throw a rage swimmer on a weedless head. There's a lot of baits that we have that cover the same zone. Some of them are just a little more efficient. Some of them have a little better triggering qualities, and that's really what it comes down to in our arsenal, is learning which ones worked the best for us, having the confidence in it to tie it on, because the most important thing you can do is be confident on what you got on the end of your rod, tied on the end of your rod. And it's got to be fun too, right? That's a big one for me. That's something that I've learned in filming the VanDam experience all over the country. Man, there's so many times that we go to these places, just like I'm going to go to Lake Fork in a week. And this time of year, you can go down there and I can go out in the timber with my Mega Live 2 and get these new Strike King homing minnows. This is a phenomenal bait for forward-facing sonar. Little homing minnow or pinging a minnow, a baby Z2 or a full-size Z2 on a jig head, and target those suspended fish out there. But I love winding a red-eye shad down the bank and feeling that rod load, or throwing a spinner bait by a stump and seeing that big boil. So part of it is, for me, is what I enjoy doing. There's a lot of different ways that you can catch a mouse, right? But finding the one that's, when you're a tournament angler, I got to use what's going to be the best. But now that I'm not a tournament angler, I get to do what's fun too. So that's really what I like to pick. And at the end of the day, that's what I try to do, is to teach people to have a better day on the water. And that's why I decided to start the VanDam experiences. Like, and you'll watch, if you watch my shows there, I'm not as entertaining. I mean, Mark Zona's one of my best buddies, dude. He's a gas to be with. He's a lot of fun. He's very giggles and laughs and stuff. That's not who I am. The thing that I know that I can do is share some of my knowledge and experience over the years to try to teach you to have a little better day on the water. That's why you're sitting in this room. You didn't come here because I'm that exciting of a person to watch, but you're hoping to maybe learn something that's going to put a few more fish in the boat, right? And as a competitive angler or television host or whatever, my job is the same as yours. You got a limited amount of time to be out there to be able to have fun and to catch fish on the water. When I was tournament fishing, it was the same thing. I got to maximize that time window that I have out there to have the most success that I can have in the day. And now that more than ever, when I have my own television crew, I got guys like this that I'm paying just to stand around. I want to get that show done as quick as possible, That meter's running when you show up, That's why, and these guys are like, man, why are we going to 17 lakes in 4 days over the next few days to film all this stuff? Because that's part of the fun of it. But the faster I can get out there and break it down and figure it out, the more efficient that I can be. And over my tournament career, it served me really well. We fished 3 to 5 day events, and my style of covering a lot of water and power fishing and just really trying to break down a lake by seasonal patterns and things like that, over the more days we had in it, the more times that I could prevail because of that. The most important thing that you can remember, and this will be true from now till the end of time, you cannot catch them where they're not at, right? The hardest part of bass fishing is finding them. It's not catching them. There's a lot of, nowadays too, we got such good equipment, such good tackle, that once we find them, there's multiple things. There's multiple ways to catch them, and there's lots of ways to do it. But you can never catch them where they're not at. So having a good search system, a good philosophy on that. And so one of the shows we did this year, we actually were at the Heavy Hitters MLF event at the Kissimmee Chain. And I had Brandon along with me for 3 days of practice. And I get asked this probably more than anything, is how do you break down a lake? How do you practice? How do you find them when you go to a 100,000 acre lake? How do you know which areas are good and all that? So we just basically took that tournament and did exactly that. And it worked out really good. We ended up, I ended up making a really good TV show out of it. Caught a lot of really big fish. Almost won the tournament too, on top of it, to boot. But that's the kind of things that we're trying to bring in the VanDam experiences, like the how, the why, the when, the where, because it's never ending. Bass fishing is far from an exact science. It's ever changing. Even if you go to a lake that you've been to a jillion times, it's not the same as it was the day before. You can't go to the same spot. You can't use the same lure. It's ever changing, especially up here in Michigan, because the habitat changes so much from year to year. Grass lakes especially. Florida's just like that too. I mean, I've been to the Kissimmee Chain, 15 times over my career. I've never been to it twice where it even hardly resembles any other time that I've been there. It's always way different. I mean, there's less hydrilla or water clarity or water levels or something. And our lakes are the same way. They change a lot from year to year. I had people were commenting when they were there, like, man, have you seen Lake Michigan this? I mean, it is 2 foot lower than it was last year right now. So that changes the habit, any bay, any place, the Grand Haven, Spring Lake, White Lake, Muskegon Lake, that changes everything that's connected to that. The only lakes that stay stable are our inland lakes that actually have a dam, which is, you can count on about 2 hands in Michigan that we have. So you got to just be aware and really focus on those changes. And again, that's why that style for me of power fishing is really critical. Even with my finesse techniques, I learned that I had to transition the same principles with my jerkbait and red eye shad and crankbaits and spinnerbaits and things like that to make fish react and be able to be more efficient and faster with a bait that's slow. So that's why we basically coined the term power finesse. So people like to finesse fish, and there's nothing, the worst, most torturous thing in the whole world for me is to say, hey, there's a half a mile long grass line right there, cast a Texas rig worm, fish that whole thing. I mean, that is torture to me. I just can't, I'm not built to move that slow. I'm not built to do that. And again, there's only gonna be a little section or 1 or 2 little points on there where they're at. And like I said, you can't catch them where they're not at. So having baits like that Ned with a baby Z2 or snapping a tube around, things like that, it allows me to use a finesse presentation, even a drop shot. Man, I call it power shot, and I'm gonna pitch that thing out there, let it hit the bottom, snap it 3 or 4 times. If I don't get a bite, reel it in, cast it over here, Lake St. Clair is notorious for that. It's a giant flat. There's not a lot of depth change or edges or grass lines or things that you can cover. So it's just a matter of putting that trolling motor on high or keeping that boat drifting with the wind or whatever it is and covering water until you run into them. Because when you do find them, just like I said, they're typically not going to be just one there. So like it all goes back down to like what I said is bass fishing is a science. It's far from exact. I've been doing it my whole life. I was fortunate. My dad took me ice fishing when I was 3 years old. I was pretty much hooked on the water. I think every kid is, and he just let me kick snow in the holes and throw ice balls and things like that. And he was very patient with me to do that. He took me, and I caught my first smallmouth when I was 7, and it ruined me from that point on. And I've loved it ever since. But I'll tell you this: every single day I go out on the water, I'm learning still. And it's amazing to me, even after all the experience that I've had, how much I'm still learning, how much it's still changing, how much more there still is with, learning new technology, new gear, and just going to these places that I've been. It's fascinating to me, and that's why I truly love it. And I can't imagine doing a whole lot else for a while on. So, like I say, if you haven't caught our show, The VanDam Experience, it's very much an educational format. I think you'll really enjoy it. I look forward to doing a whole lot more of them. We got a really good lineup of them coming up, and we're gonna have a really good time over the next few weeks. So appreciate all the support for so many years and coming out this afternoon because why not, right? Pretty nice day. Got to go to the sports show. Everybody's tired of winter. Time to go bass fishing though. So thank you so much. And if you want to take a look at any of my stuff here, it's right up here at the front. Yes, sir.
What channel is
Oh, yeah. It's on. So it's on the Outdoor channel right now. It's 13 original episodes on there, and then at the end of the first set of airings, which is going to be the end of this month, 1st of April, it ends up on the My Outdoor TV app. It'll be, you can watch it on Apple TV. You can get the Outdoor channel on Apple TV. You can get it, you can't get it on YouTube TV, which I switched to this past year. So I get it on the Friendly TV app. Eventually we'll have all of the shows will end up on our YouTube channel too, but we have to give them the first half of the year to watch them. But, you know, our first season is pretty diverse. You know, we traveled the country, but, you know, a good many of the shows I did in the northern regions. We went to New York for a few. I did, you know, one or two at St. Clair, and some of them on the inland lakes too. So I did a lot of northern Michigan fishing, and even when I'm south, though, I'm doing the same things that I do here, you know. So it's been a good run. Any other questions? Yeah.
It's always windy in the spring.
The wind is your friend.
Yeah. Well, tell us, give us some tips on how do you fish in the wind, or what direction is good or bad for the wind?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So the first and foremost, fishing in the wind, part of it is equipment. So the rig that I've got a Nitro Z21 with an Ultrex Quest trolling motor with lithium batteries. So it don't matter how windy it is, as long as I can keep the trolling motor in the water at all, I mean, I can fish. Like, we filmed a show at Buffalo this year, New York, on the, you know, it's the eastern end of Lake Erie, and the wind was blowing on the west like 20 the day we were there, and it got so rough that I could still fish, but it was killing my crew. So, you know, we went into a little calmer water. But on our inland lakes, man, there's no time when I can't be out there. So first and foremost, you want to make sure, I don't want you to be out in the wind in an unsafe situation, right? Like Lake St. Clair is one of my favorite places on the planet to fish. But if you got a 16-foot aluminum boat, you better pick your days and pick your distances from the ramp, right? It's special over there in the spring. And you see guys out, I see guys 2 miles offshore in kayaks. Okay, not me. But yeah, so if you have the right setup, first and foremost, that really helps. And most everybody now, I mean, again, the technology is so good on our trolling motors. Biggest game changer ever was spot lock on a trolling motor. So you can get out there in the wind, just hit the spot lock, and you can really focus on your fishing. I saw, like, my son Jackson and Nicholas, when they were first coming up in college fishing, when they switched from a cable-operated foot-controlled trolling motor without spot lock to an Ultrex with it, they were twice as efficient. They are so much better in their boat control that really helps for that. What I try to do is use the wind to my advantage. So if it's so windy that you can't go into it, then you don't fight it, right? You got to go with it, and you got to use techniques and things that you can be efficient in that situation. So that means winding something. I mean, that's when it's super windy, I'm gonna crank, or I'm gonna throw a spinnerbait, or I'm gonna throw a thunder cricket. Fish are way more active in windy conditions. You know, it cuts down the light penetration, it pushes a lot of planktons. You know, people have said before, I've heard people say, the wind blew the bait fish into this pocket or into this bank, you know, into the windy shore. That is never the case. I'll promise you that the shad and the bait fish, the shiners, they can swim against any amount of current that the wind can create. They go there typically because that's where the plankton ends up. If you get 2 or 3 days of wind, especially in these southern reservoirs where it's shad oriented, where it's 2 or 3 out of the same day, I see this a lot at Table Rock Lake or Bull Shoals, highland reservoirs in the south. All the plankton stacks up there, and that's where all the, you know, the whole food chain's at. So that's why you go where the wind's at. But the biggest advantage that you have with the wind is the light penetration, you know, gets reduced, and the bass know that they can be a more efficient predator. So, and they use it. So wind creates current as well. So, I mean, if you can find gaps between, narrows between islands or up onto a shallow flat, things like that, it creates an edge for them to be able to ambush. I try, if possible, to always fish my baits so that they're going to be coming to the fish naturally. So either cross the wind or upwind, you know, so that it's coming back to them. I mean, if there's current from the wind, they're going to be facing into it, right? If you're out here in the Grand River, he's not sitting his tail upstream. They're sitting there pointed that way. So the wind does the same thing on a natural lake. Even though it's a subtle current, they're going to be swimming around, swimming into the wind, basically. So if I can cast across the wind, that bait's coming across in front of them. That's the way you want to present baits. But it just allows you to use a moving bait. So, I mean, instead of, if it's dead calm and slick, you might have to throw a wacky rig ocho to get them to bite, right? Slow sink, you know. You can't do that if it's blowing 25. You can't feel it. The wind's blowing a bow in your line, so you got to use techniques that are efficient. That's where your jerk bait and your spinner bait and crank bait and things, you know, all that stuff really plays into it. So I love the wind. You know, even early season, right now, the wind is the most important thing that I look at, the wind direction and knowing how the fish are going to set up, because it's going to control the water temperature. It's the only time of the year that I use a water temperature gauge is right now, that I really put a lot of stock into it, because I've learned that the water temperature has nothing to do with their activity level. I mean, just because if it's 41, it don't mean they're not going to bite. But if you can find 43 or 44 degree water on the same lake that most of it's 41, they know too. They find that. So I'm looking for that, and the wind is the biggest factor in that right now. Does that answer your question fairly well? Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about color in Lake St. Clair. You know, sometimes it's really, really clear, and sometimes it has that green
Yep.
tint to it, and how you change your bait color selection and bait when you're in that green.
Yep.
Because it's not like dark, but it's.
Yeah, no, so the one thing is Lake St. Clair, those fish there for the most part are clear water fish. I don't catch them well other than in the early spring there in dirty, dirty water. I mean, this pre-spawn, I've seen it when it's muddy, it puts them shallow and they get locked on the bottom, and it's the greatest cranking bite I've ever seen in my life. But during the summer months, or if you see dirty water blown to or plankton bloom into there, that's never a good thing. So my favorite thing when the water starts getting a little clear is giving them something more visible. That right there, that siren color, is, you know, jerkbait or whatever, that's key. The other thing that I've seen it do there especially is that if you get chalky water, start getting dirty water, it locks them down on the bottom. So whatever you're using needs to be down on the bottom too. So that's when, I mean, it's my favorite time to crank there. So even in the summer when it gets chalky, you know, you can, and it gets that way. The shipping channel will get stirred up, or, you know, you get a big rain there and whatever, it'll get like that. Even out in the middle when you're fishing 15, 17, 18 foot of water, you know, I want to throw a 5XD or a 6XD and get it right down to the bottom, where before I would throw a gravel dog 10 in 17 foot of water that only runs 10 foot because they see it from so far. They come up there and they hammer it. It's one of my favorite bait. Or throw a thunder cricket that's 3 or 4 foot down in the middle that's 17, 18 foot deep, but it's clear enough where they come right from the bottom and rock it up and get it. But when it gets chalky, you got to throw stuff that's visible. That day in, day out, if I had to pick one color for Lake St. Clair for the whole year, it'd be that. I mean, they bite it in the crystal clear water, but they dang sure bite it in that chalky water a lot better. Something chartreuse. Chartreuse blue glimmer and siren are the two best. I mean, I've thrown that for years and tried to, you know, but natural is always good too, right? It's just that I'm trying to get them to see it from a little further away. Okay? One more question. I know we got another seminar coming in, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Kind of related to his question too, like mid-late summer when you get those thick algae blooms,
Yes.
does that drive fish away, or is it?
So there's a lot of debate on algae blooms and fish. I have thought that at times in the past, but I've also seen that it's probably not true. I've fished some lakes in Minnesota and Wisconsin that the whole lake goes to pea green, like way worse than anything I've ever seen here in Michigan, and still been able to be really, really successful on them. I think on some of these lakes, like a really good example is Oneida Lake in New York, is one I've been to, that the wind will push, it'll get an algae bloom, and it'll push it all to one shore. And those are clear water fish, very, very much like Grand Traverse Bay, or even Lake St. Clair, but you know, most of the rest of the Great Lakes is clearer even than Lake St. Clair, right? But when I've seen that over there, I've seen what I feel like those fish, they don't go up in the shallows in it. They got options. They know to go to the middle or follow the bait out in the middle. But that's very much it's very much lake to lake. The forage base in a system is the most controlling factor of how fish act than anything else that I've ever seen. So like when you go, like I'm going to Hartwell and to Lake Murray in a couple weeks, and they have blueback herring in them. When blueback herring got in those lakes, it totally changed the way the bass act. Gull Lake down here by me, it's got smelt. totally changed the way the fish are. They nomadically swim around the middle of it because that's where the forage is at. So they go where the food is at. If it's an inland lake that has nothing but bluegill, they focus on where the bluegill are at. So it's really understanding the forage as you travel around the country like I do is the most valuable asset that you can go to and starting to know how the fish might act, just knowing the forage base. And thankfully now, you can basically Google it anywhere you go. At Lake Gunnersville to Lake Hartwell to Lake Havasu out west, or Clear Lake in California, which has got hitch in it, to, you know, the Great Lakes, gobies, or whatever it is. They go, you know, gobies were as a great example that everybody here can relate to. Smallmouth used to move tremendously in our lakes, in our systems, in the Great Lakes. When the gobies got here, gobies live on rocks. They don't live on sand. They live on hard bottom. They don't move. Our smallmouth don't move either anymore. They used to travel great distances and chase perch and emerald shiners, and they still do that to some degree. They eat all those things, but they stay locked where the gobies are at. So they are a lot less nomadic now. I mean, out in Lake Erie, which has got a lot of rock on the western end there, they don't ever go. They don't ever leave those shoals, those humps. They might come in to spawn. Most of them spawn out there in 25 or 30 foot of water. They don't ever leave because why would they? They got an unlimited forage supply there all the time. So knowing the forage is a big deal. So I know they got another seminar coming in. I, again, appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to be around. I got another one on Lake Ultimate in a little bit. Appreciate the support. Get out there and go fishing. They're biting.